Hello everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here. Welcome to the Music Masterclass. So this is my Thursday series where we talk about making music. We talk about composing, arranging, improvising, any form of music making. And I'm going to be looking at some of the music that you've been creating and submitting, giving my feedback, and maybe talking about some things that have been on my mind lately. And we're going to have some fun. So I've got a few different things all queued up, ready to talk about. So assuming that everything's fine, feel free to let me know if sound and everything is okay, because, you never know. I'm going to just talk about a handful of different things here. So the first thing I want to do, actually, is just follow up with Frank Paul, who has been creating this fugue, and we've looked at a couple steps of it, and as he goes along, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to introduce everyone to the idea of what these steps are. And the last time we looked at this, I had commented about the voice entries not making sense, or at least not being the traditional entry of voices. So let me just play the latest version of it, and then I'll continue to talk about what's going on. So here is this is basically the exposition of the fugue. This is the statement of the subject in all three voices. So it's quiet, yes, and I think it is a little quiet. I've got the volume turned here, but I'll make sure that I've got a little more volume on anything where I need it. Let me make sure, actually, while I'm thinking of it, that I don't still have it turned down from nope, it's the right regular volume level. But yeah, I agree that piece was a little quiet. So yeah, this is great sounding piece, totally capturing the vibe of the Baroque music. It's got the right stuff going on, but I want to talk specifically just a little bit about the voices. So the comment I had made before on a previous version of this was that the voice entrances didn't completely line up with my expectations. And to some extent, that is still true now, but I think maybe I can clear up some confusion here. So this is a fugue in three voices. I expect there to be three voices, one voice that's basically on top, one voice that's basically in the middle, one voice that's basically on the bottom. They might occasionally cross. The middle voice might occasionally be higher than where that top voice was, or occasionally lower than the bottom voice, but think of it as essentially three separate tracks to be in. So when I hear this first voice come in at this pitch level, that to me feels like that's probably the top voice, because I'm expecting the other voices to be below it. I could be surprised and there's another voice that comes in above it, but this is what I hear. So the top voice is the first voice. And now I hear a second voice coming in, a fifth above pitch-wise, but it's actually an octave and a fourth below, right? So that's kind of setting up an expectation in my mind that the third voice is going to be the middle voice, which is, totally what I expect. So we've got the top voice first, then the bottom voice, and then we're going to have the middle voice. And that is the order that I'm expecting here. So this is the top voice. And now the same thing in the bottom voice. But at this point, look at where this top voice is. This top voice is now almost an octave below where it started. Not that this is a problem, but kind of check out what's happening here. This voice is now kind of living down in this range. So the top voice has now occupied the middle ground, right? I'm glad to hear that everyone else's audio is constant. When I look at my monitor screen over here, I see it go black every once in a while. So there are dropouts that happen occasionally. I will say that, and I'm going to chalk that up to my internet. So the top voice has now descended into the middle voice's territory. So now when the middle voice comes in here, this is the middle voice, right? This is the middle voice, but it's a direct continuation of the top voice, right? This feels like the top voice has become the middle voice. And that's not really what I expect. I expect the top voice to have remained on top, and then that middle voice to enter. And here, this feels like the middle voice is still in the same instrument, right? This middle voice, the top voice was going. It just kind of continued, right? It was the top voice, and now suddenly it's the third voice. So it feels like it's not really the third voice. And by which I mean the middle voice. So I think the best way to address that would be to change the octave here. Maybe right here, start dropping it up an octave. And now, and then these notes then can be more clearly another voice. So let's hear it from here. Now I have a clearer sense that when this voice ends, when that voice enters, that it really is a distinct voice. It's not just the first voice continuing, but it's a new voice. That separation is really kind of critical to that. And then also you'd have to actually use voices. Like I'd want to move this note into voice 1 and then put this note down here so that it might sound like this. And then you would ask yourself, do we really need 2 beats of rest there, or is there something else that that original voice could be doing? But this is what I mean about really having 3 distinct voices. Top voice entering first, in this case, bottom voice entering second, in this case, middle voice entering third, in this case, and really being clear, each voice staying in its own lane. So this is what we're expecting in a fugue, and so Frank, that is my feedback there. The way everything is working harmonically and everything, great, but I just still want that separation between the voices. All right, so now moving, actually not moving anywhere as far as genre, like we're still going to be living in the Baroque here. I want to talk some more about this cello suite. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is not look at this cello suite and try to remember it. Those of you doing the Musicianship Skills Workshop will remember that I was working on memorizing that thing, and I haven't looked at it in a couple weeks, but now I want to see. And I'm just going to try to play it. And I'm doing, okay, I'll put it on the screen so you all can see it, but I'm not going to look at it, right? I'm going to cover it with a piece of paper so I can't see it. And I'm remembering as much as I can. This part is going to be easy. That's as far as I memorized. I still had to think a little bit. I had to think a lot to pull that off, but it's pretty well there. And so if you were following along when I was talking through my process, how I was conceptualizing it, how I was thinking through what was going on, understanding it so it's not just a selection of notes. That's still the same things I was processing. Now, did I get anything wrong? I don't think so. I think I actually got it. Screen freeze? Screen freeze? Huh. I look like I'm good. I look like I'm good on my screen here. Anyway, so maybe Dan, that might just be you. I don't know. I think I'm still good here. So yeah, Dan, you might be having some internet slowness or something. I don't know. But if anyone else is seeing problems, let me know. So anyhow, that was just my little memorization exercise there on the first 8 bars there, 7 bars really. And actually, I know that bar too. I mean, I didn't really learn it, but now I can see it's the exact same thing, right? Is the exact It's the exact same thing as the first measure, but transposed down to E minor instead of G major. So I actually know measure 8 now, just by knowing, hey, it's the first measure, but in E minor. Then it's got some other stuff going on that I haven't looked at. All right, so the next thing I want to do, though, is take a look at the minuet, and in particular the major key minuet, because this is what Steinar has arranged. And so what I'm going to do, so here's his version, and here is the original version. And let's see if I can bring you, if you're here, I'm going to invite you on. So you are welcome to be discussing this with me. But what I'm going to do is play the original minuet. I'll turn repeats off just in the interest of time. And we'll hear that while we get our stuff together here. All right, and then it goes into the minor key version. All right, you are with us now. So first of all, how am I doing on your names? Is that there's kind of a sh to the s? Yes.
No, you did it right, Steinar.
Steinar. Okay.
Steinar. Yeah.
Okay. So good. I'm looking forward to. I've just briefly listened to your arrangement. It definitely has a much fuller sound than the original. Before we listen to your arrangement, what else do you want to tell us? I mean, we talked about the process of it, but this will be most people's first time actually hearing it. What do you want to tell us about your arrangement here?
Yeah. Of course, the Cello Suite is a solo suite for cello, and it's a monophonic kind of piece. So what I'm doing is making it into a polyphonic with 5 voices. So that in itself is a challenge. And on the other hand, it may open up for some flexibility in terms of adding voices, counter motions, etc. So, but I think it's important to still keep the feeling of the original version, the Minuet, which is a dance. So my melodic idea is kind of keep that kind of a light feeling, and you will see here on the quarter notes, I added this dash dot notation indicating a pizzicato. So it kind of, yeah.
Cool. Now, if you want to tell string players to play pizzicato, you should probably put the word pizz in there, because otherwise they might just think of it as a bow stroke.
That's
thing.
right. But these are brass players.
So gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, you said pizzicato, and I started thinking strings, but yeah.
It's
just
thinking about the feeling.
Pizzicato.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's kind of imitation.
Of course. All right. So, let's take a listen to this. So you moved it to B flat, so it would fit ranges
that's because
better.
of the range of the trumpet and the horn.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And we are looking at it in concert pitch now, which makes me happy, because then I don't have to think about the transposition. But what I would do is I do want to just turn off concert pitch for a moment, just so we can see, before we play it, what's going on range-wise. You know, the melody starts with a middle C, which is a good place to be starting. That's like, it's not like you can't play lower than that on trumpet, but, that's a good, solid low note to have. Yeah. And it looks like the range kind of stays all nicely on the staff, not seeing much in the way of ledger lines here, either above or below the staff for the trumpet, so that makes me happy. The horns, I have also less of a clear sense of their range, but I know that that note there is not low the way it is for trumpet. And so ranges all look good. And when I look, I'm also just taking a quick look at the textural things. And this is something that you might want to do if you're like looking at a piece of music for the first time, speaking to the people who didn't write this, just to kind of get an idea of what's going on. Okay, we see it starts off with all 5 horns. We see that there's places where it's one clearly having a melody and the others having these chords, other places where everyone's doing these eighth notes together. And the first thing I look at is, oh, are they all playing it in unison? Because, it originally was just a single line, but I can tell it's not because the shapes of these lines are different, right? This line's going down and those lines are going up. So it's at least 2-part harmony. I don't even have to look at any more to see that. And so I see some nice textural things going on, half notes against the moving lines here. So I see some nice variety, and then I see more simplification of the texture here. So, I'm seeing a lot of the things I want to see. I see the first trumpet getting a break here, which I'm sure they will appreciate. And I see a lot of things that now give me some idea of what to expect before I play it. So anything else you want to tell us before I hit the play button?
No, that's basically the whole thing. Of course, I had to choose some chord progression here, and that's what I really like to have an input on later on.
Okay, because you've kind of done your own harmonic thing. I mean, I talked through a little bit of a harmonic analysis at one point, but I'm not a complete one necessarily, and you might have done some of your own stuff here.
Yeah, might so, but I try to remember what you said, and that you should kind of think in context rather than seeing at each individual note. So yes, let's see.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. And yes, I'm now looking at the chat and seeing that. Yeah, when I put the piece of paper over the screen to not cheat, that of course covered my face too. Didn't really think about that, but there you go. I should devise a better cover my screen mechanism. All right, let's hear this thing. And again, I've got the repeats turned off just in the interest of saving a little time here. So let's hear it. I'll hear the repeat. Yeah, really nice. I love the things that you've done with this. And yeah, when I thought I was turning repeats off, I actually turned them back on. But that's fine.
Yeah.
It's not that long. And, let us really hear the first and second ending in context. And if you're trying to understand anything about balance of sections, like how much of this texture do we have compared to this other texture, it is kind of necessary to hear the repeats to really get a sense of, was there too much of this and not enough of that? So, it's just as well that I did that. So, some of my favorite things going on. So, first of all, right off the bat, I think that's a very effective starting texture with one melody and simple chords here. And then it feels almost like a little call and response thing of that texture being answered by that unison, or not unison, homorhythmic texture. So I like how that back and forth works, and then I like how it passes to the second trumpet here. And one thing I should point out is when MuseScore plays this back, we are barely aware that it's a different trumpet player than played the first line, because it's the same synthesizer. But in a real ensemble, that it's a different player. And there's a pretty good chance that it'll sound more noticeably different. So that was, a good choice, I think, there. This, as far as the harmony goes, that chord there, that D minor chord that you have there, was that a little, I don't remember that being clearly articulated in the original. Was that kind of your own invention there?
It's kind of my own invention, probably, but in the original, it's only the leading voice you see on top on the first trumpet. So,
So you have to kind of guess. So that, because I remember this all being one big old 5 chord. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take this passage here and transpose it to B flat. So we're seeing the same thing. B flat. And now I'm going to take yours and go back to concert pitch. So I'm really seeing what's happening here. So it's this D, so this is the half note in bar 4. Oops, half note in bar 4. So it's right here. Oh yeah, and here it really is just a 1 chord, and you've made it more interesting, right? You put a deceptive resolution on it. Yeah. I'm fine with that. I like it. The one place where, okay, so first of all, if I look at this little measure here, I wasn't as aware that this is all unison in here as I am now, so I was going to be a little worried that this motion, F to G minor back to F, was going to give you some weird parallel fifths and other things happening, but it doesn't, because you're in unison for these 2 notes. Actually, you're not in unison, just 1 note, yeah?
Yeah. I try to avoid parallel fifths and fourths,
Yeah. Normally, if you see 2 root position chords a step apart, that's like, danger sign that you want to look out for. And then I look, and then the next chord is also another root position chord a step apart. I worry a little bit, but when you look at what the bass line is doing, it's only root position in that it eventually gets to the low G. But I am a little curious about the, let me think about this. There's like a dissonance here where the tuba has a B flat and everyone else has an A. And I see why the tuba should have the B flat, because it's arpeggiating this chord. And I could see why you'd give everyone else the A to approach the G, maybe. But that's one spot where I might think about whether there's something else you could do.
I didn't catch that. No, I agree.
I mean, it's not that dissonance in itself is bad, but you've got basically almost unison, right? Starting on beat 2. Yeah, maybe it really just means that, because if everyone else is doing that, maybe it really just means you can't have that B flat there that you want to have. Maybe. I don't know. Let me just try something. I just want to try giving him an F sharp. Yeah, that's a possible thing. Just as a, just to tonicize that G minor a little bit more and avoid that dissonance and let the unison of the other horns speak a little better. That's a possibility. Yeah, lots of possibilities there. I will let you sort that out.
Yeah. And maybe another thing I forgot to add was this second ending of the first part, where it's completely different than the original, because the two repeats in
Ah,
the original are like the first ending both times. So I
oh yeah.
added a tonic
At a first, second ending,
chord
yeah.
there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And that's good. I like that. It changes things up, but you're already changing things up, and that made sense to me when I heard it. So
Mm.
I'm not second guessing that at all. The only other thing that jumped, so I love then the texture change here. This is great. This I really like the sound of going it's basically one to dominant two here. Um, but this doesn't feel quite as much like Bach as everything else. And so before I go back and look at the original, uh, I'll just give you an opportunity to talk about any conscious choices you might have made here in going from basically an F chord directly to a G chord there. If is that I don't know. What do you anything you want to tell us about that?
Well, I thought of it as a secondary dominant,
Mm-hmm.
going into the C in the next
Yes, yes. So
part
the
there.
G makes total sense getting to the C minor. What
Mm.
I'm wondering about is the transition getting from the F to the G feels abrupt in a way that's not Bachian. It's very pop music-y. Any
Mm.
number of the Beatles songs that I was looking at last couple months ago or whenever it was did that, go from one to dominant two. I mean, that's a super common thing in, music of pop music of the 20th century, but somehow it doesn't feel as Bachy. And so I want to go back and look at the original and
Mm.
see what he did there. Okay, so here's the thing that Bach and I talked about this in my analysis that this isn't really a G7 here, right? It's really a diminished chord. He doesn't ever give you the G, and that's part of it, I think. And also the voice leading aspect of it, the C on beat 2 going to a B here. This all makes sense to me. I want to compare this to yeah, I feel like maybe the G is out of character in that way.
Mm.
And so what I might do is change this. So his version was more of a B diminished sound. And so I'm just going to perform a little surgery here and get rid of some of those G's. And actually, can I do that? Can I do that and get away with it? In the original, the melody is the D. There's not a clear, bass note other than that note. I'm gonna go with that F for the moment, and I'll let the G happen later in the measure. And I just want to hear this now.
Mm.
Eh, it's a little less GE. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, at least on the first measure. But if you look at the original, there is a G on the third eighth note, I think. Let's see.
Yeah,
No,
that's why I've
no, no,
transposed
no,
it to make
no.
myself.
It's
Yeah,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no root here, and
yeah,
that is why I've
yeah,
notated it as a diminished chord in
yeah,
my
yeah.
analysis. So, but I like the G, and Bach would not have hesitated to use the G, but I think maybe he wouldn't have gone there right away. So I
No.
think the thing that feels more Bach-like is to make this be more of a B diminished sound for the first two beats, then
Mm.
more of the G sound.
Mm.
So I'm going to try something else. I didn't like the low F, but I'm going to try low A flats here. I also could consider just dropping the tuba out of the texture. Um, the C here is a little problematic. I'm going to change that to a D only because yeah. Now that sounds a little more like it. Let me hear it in context. I don't love the A flat either, so let me just lose the tuba. Yeah, that's going to require more thought from me, I think. But in any case, the direct motion to a really clear root position G chord felt off to me, and when I compare it to the original, I see that it's not what Bach did.
Mm.
And then the same thing happens when you use the same thing over here in B flat, right? It's a little too much like, here's a 1 chord, here's a 5 of 5 that is really in your face, and I feel like Bach's version whoa, was that really an F there, or is that a wrong note?
I think that note is wrong.
Yeah, I think it is too. It makes no sense. So in the original here, we don't hear the root until the second beat there, and I feel like I it's not like I could put into words what it is about that whole step root motion from 1 to dominant 2 that just doesn't feel in character to me. And maybe if I studied that much more, or someone else can find more examples of it, they could say, oh no, Bach did that in this piece and he does that all the time and it's fine. But something about it feels more like Beatles than Bach to me, is
Yeah.
is not the only thing I would say about that. But it's the right harmony. It's just how clearly it's being stated, and whether that chord really should be as clearly in root position like that.
Mm.
So maybe that's a place where you lose the bass entirely. Like here, when I took the tuba out, I didn't like it. But what if I take it out the whole part? And then, you bring in the tuba maybe somewhere around here.
Mm.
And then actually give him the root. Whoops. Give him the root, because I like roots. And I want to hear that now. I don't know. Something like that could work also.
Mm.
But yeah, that is just this little bit of finesse of that one little change that kind of
To make it more
out
faithful to Bach.
Yeah, make it more feel like Bach, assuming that is the goal. I mean, there's nothing about this that's going to remind anyone of the Beatles specifically, but it does have a 20th century pop music, pop, jazz, whatever, feel in that really direct motion from 1 to 5 of 5 that wasn't prepared in a way that felt like Bach. And so to me it felt familiar, but a different familiar.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was
tip.
Cool. That was the only thing that actually popped out at me as feeling, everything else about how you treated this in terms of the orchestration and, deciding how am I going to take this one voice piece and expand it into multiple voices. I think it worked really, really, really well. That was just one thing that jumped out at me. So yeah, great job. Did you have any other things that you wanted to talk about in this?
No, not really. I plan to do the same with the Minuet too.
Good.
So I can bring that up later, maybe.
So I'm curious, is your impression that those two minuets are meant to actually flow together directly without a break between them?
Yes, I think so. I read about it. So, and the Minuet was not originally part of the suite form in the Baroque area. It came in later. So I read something about it, that they should be performed together.
Yeah, because to me it seems weird to have two minuets back to back anyhow, and then the way the first one ends, leads directly into the second one to me in some sort of way. Well, it won't now that I've changed the key, but let's go back to the original key. Yeah, it just really feels like maybe it's because I'm hearing it in the same key, at the same tempo with no break, but yeah, it feels very much like they're designed to just go together.
I think in Bach's original score, which was made by his second wife, there is at the end of Minuet 2, it says that go back to Minuet 1, but with no repeats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, really, really nice job on this. Lots of nice. Now, the one thing about when I pulled the tuba out there, I like that idea in that it gives us that much more textural variety. That is the one thing, if you're going to do more than just this movement, like if you're going to do the next movement also, to be really aware of not having all five horns playing all the time. And you do that a little, right? Here you manage to pull a couple horns out, but there's nothing wrong with losing the tuba for parts of it also. And the longer the piece goes on, the more important it is to have that sort of variety of letting there be places where it's just two horns, or even just one, because of course that's where it came from.
Yeah, I'm a trumpet player myself, so I always appreciate the rest in between the playing.
And I've commented about this before in a couple other people's pieces, but I'll tell you that this was like really hit home for me when I wrote a hymn that was really kind of a funeral hymn. It was written specifically for a brother-in-law who died, and so it's like a da, 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 and it was in 3, and at this tempo, it was a lot of dotted half notes for the trumpet player. Do, da, dum, da, 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 dum. And it went on for like 32 measures of that, and he's like, no. You can't give me that to play. And this is a top-notch professional trumpet player. It's not that he says I'm incapable of playing it, but he's like, that's just bad writing, and that's not how you write for trumpet. So he's
you need to breathe in between the playing.
Yes, and so I rescored it a little bit to pass the melody among different instruments. So Humble Music, you're asking about ABA. Are you asking if that is the form of this minuet, or are you asking about doing the minuets as like the major, the minor, and come back to the major? Is that what you're asking? I feel like maybe that's what you're asking. Because that could be kind of interesting. Oh. No, it doesn't come back. Yeah, because that could be interesting to do the major minuet, then the minor minuet as like a bridge, and then go back to the major minuet. That could be kind of interesting. Yeah. So, Dean, I'm not sure what your question is about the double. If that's is that a technical term? I'm not quite sure what you're asking about that. So this is with Minuet1 da capo. It even so this is what you were talking about, Steinar. That it actually does say to go back to Minuet 1. So yeah, it is kind of an ABA form.
With no repeats.
Yeah, it really is a ABA form then. Huh. Interesting. So it's not really a second minuet as much as a B section. I mean, they apparently written at 2 different times, but when it got assembled this way, that was the intent, huh?
Yeah, he does exactly the same in the second cello suite. There is also a minuet 1 and 2.
Ah, okay.
Then it starts in the minor, the minuet 1, and the minuet 2 is in major, the opposite of in cello suite 1.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And parallel, like G major, G minor, as opposed to like relative major, relative minor?
Yep.
Okay.
In cello suite 2, it's another key, but it's the same.
Cool.
The parallel minor.
All right. I'm going to make one other observation because I'm looking at it right now. Because I was talking about that something going from 1 directly to 5 of 5 felt a little out of character, and I characterized it in terms of root motion, root position chord moving by whole step, which is a little odd other than 4 going to 5. Here's an example that's not out of character, and I just want to contrast it. Here's in the minor key one. I'm looking at this arpeggio, D followed by C. And if I play it like that, it doesn't sound at all like Bach. Oh, one dominant 7th chord going to another dominant 7th chord, that doesn't feel right at all. But this is a sequence, and it's going to make sense. Yeah. That is Bach City there. You know, so you know that you're just going around the circle. I didn't do that right, but this idea of taking a pattern. Taking some pattern, moving it around the circle of fifths like that, and you're going to end up with exactly that, because you're going to have. This is my pattern now, not Bach's pattern. I should use Bach's pattern. D to G, then C. Going to F, right? So you're always going to have that 5-1, 5-1, or 5-1, 5-1. So you're going to have that, and it's going to the roots. One sequence, as long as your sequence outlines that circle of fifths like that, the next iteration of the sequence is going to be a whole step lower, because that's what the circle of fifths does. So that motion is going to be super common. And yeah, that came up in the counterpoint course. I think someone was working on a sequence, and I think it was Frank, actually, and I was commenting about that aspect of it. So yeah, you have to take with a grain of salt the comments that I'm making about these whole step motions. It's not that they don't happen at all. It's that they happen in the right context. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Any final words before we part on that?
No, I don't think so. Thank you for all the comments.
Sure.
I'm going to play this with my brass quintet to try it
beautiful.
live. Yeah.
When's that going to happen?
Maybe next week.
Okay, beautiful. Get a recording of it, post it. Love to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for the music, and thanks for the topic of conversation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do at this point is I want to talk about a couple other random things that have come up, and just talk about them a little bit. So one of them is this barbershop piece, and we're going to come back to this in a second. But before I do that, I want to show you something else that I just wrote yesterday. Why? Because, I don't know, it's fun. Where is it? Right here. So let me tell you about this piece here. I am currently putting together a set of tutorials for MuseScore 4. The idea being to teach you, like, by entering this piece, you will learn a lot. And so I want one piece that teaches you essentially everything you need to know about basic note input. Some of you, if you've seen my earlier tutorials, I used Mary Had a Little Lamb for that for a little while. But you don't learn everything in that, because there's no rests, there's no ties, there's no accidentals. You learn some things, but you miss some things. So then I did another version of that tutorial where, again, it was just like a little 4-measure melody, and I threw in some ties and threw in some accidentals, but it didn't add up to anything, and I don't feel it was as compelling of a demo. It was more useful, perhaps, in terms of teaching you everything you maybe needed, but it didn't feel like something that someone would want to actually try themselves. So for MuseScore 4, I'm putting together a series of tutorials that are going to be designed to do that. Little pieces of music, and then I show you how I enter it, and then you try your hand at either the same piece or I make another piece. So I'm creating these little pieces for that. And let me play you this little piece here. I haven't actually tried to play it yet. There you go. Oh, trio Dean. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is absolutely a term I do know. And so yeah, it has that idea. Although it didn't feel like a different feel like a trio normally would. But yeah, now I get what you mean. So anyhow, this little piece, it's not much of a piece of by any stretch, but it's interesting because it's in kind of that simple two voice style of a lot of those Bach, right? It's in that kind of style in some ways, in that it's like, one finger, one note in each hand, and simple melody based on repetition, right? And then the next phrase is the same thing, but with a little variation. And I put that variation in there because, like I said, I wanted a rest. I needed to give you an opportunity to enter a rest, and I wanted an opportunity to teach you copy and paste. And so, that's going to be what this piece is. And then the bottom staff is where I show you, oh, here's how you do accidentals, and here's how you do a triplet. So the idea is, in hopefully like one 15-minute demo, I can demonstrate pretty much everything you need to know about note input, at least everything that everyone needs to know about note input. Because, I'm not using multiple voices in this, but a lot of people will never use multiple voices. If you're not writing for piano or guitar or choir, you're not going to use multiple voices. That everything that Steinar's piece had going in it, 5 brass instruments, he could write an entire symphony and not or an entire brass quintet of multiple movements. He could do that entire cello suite for the 5 instruments and never encounter multiple voices because a trumpet can't play 2 notes at once. So it's really only going to come up when you're writing for piano or guitar or choir music, where you put soprano and alto on one and tenor and bass on the other. So I didn't put multiple voices in this example, but then I'll do a separate short little piece that says, all right, now that you've already learned accidentals, you've already learned all these other things, now let's learn what you need for choral music. Hey, here's multiple voices, here's lyrics, here's whatever else. So anyhow, that's the idea here. So why am I talking about this? I don't know. One, because it's kind of fun to talk about the music that I'm thinking about, but I get to tell you about certain aspects of this, like the fact that it is this 2 voices, and everything about this piece, if you just talk about the elements that are in it, it could have been one of those Bach pieces from that period. And yet, harmonically, yeah, I'm using more accidentals more freely, more stuff than I'm using more stuff here than Bach would have used harmonically. Brian, you're asking about slurs, and I sort of consciously decided to draw the line somewhere. I wanted to make sure that I showed people how to use the palette, so the tempo, the dynamics, and the articulation there. I wanted to show how to add symbols. But I think for the slurs, I'm going to do a separate, when I do maybe the vocal one, I'll add slurs, or if I'm going to do another piano version where you get to build entire chords and do cross staff notation, do more advanced stuff, I'll get slurs in for that, and I'll get slurs in for, like, I'll do one that's an ensemble score, say a string quartet score or a brass score maybe, and then those I'll have slurs. So yeah, the idea is I'm going to kind of partition things out a little bit so that each of these tutorials covers like some subset of MuseScore's features, and by the time you've done all 5 or 6 tutorials, you've learned a lot. That is my goal here. And so yeah, slurs, kind of had to draw the line somewhere, and right now I've drawn it there. But yeah, they'll be in the vocal and the other ones. But yeah, if we look at what's going on here, there's, you could still analyze this harmonically and see that there's secondary dominance and all the normal kind of stuff that we expect to see in this piece. Yeah, that's more of a jazzyism thing than a Bachism thing. So yeah, the idea was this is note input and real basic use the palette to enter things, just so you see how to do it. And because then once you know how to use the palette, you can explore it on your own and say, hey, look, there's slurs there. Hey, look, now I know how to enter slurs, right? So once you know how to use the palette, there's not a ton more to show, but slurs are special in a lot of ways. So yeah, I'll definitely cover them. All right. So the other things that I want to talk about here, Rod. Rod, you're here? Yes. So you've got this and actually, let me see if you're still here. I'm going to invite you if you want to come join here. So if Rod is still here, I know it's way past bedtime, but if you're here and you want to tell us about I'm All Alone, you can talk about it. So you've entered it here into MuseScore, I guess, and looks good. I assume that's your work of entering it, and I'm not, I didn't compare it yet to the original. But you asked specifically about this ninth chord here, or maybe you didn't ask so much as comment about it, and I do want to say a word or two about that ninth chord as it relates to barbershop. So let me actually see where your post was, so I'm not lying here. Always wondered about beat 1, measure 5, ninth chord, not common. Okay, and also the gliss at the end of the tag. All right. Yeah, let me play through this piece here, and then talk a little bit about those things. All right, yeah, that is a lovely arrangement, and it's a beautiful song, and yeah, the gliss is the MuseScore playback of it, maybe not maybe like you say, not doing favors. But cool. So Rod, if you're here, no camera, no, that's fine. But feel free to comment as you feel. So I want to point out a few things. So one of them was this chord here, bar 5, first chord. So it is an add 9, yes, because this is an A flat triad with a ninth. And the thing is, as I understand it, and you have to remember, I know very little. I know what I've read and what I heard. I read a little bit about barbershop harmony in the past and have looked up things. And then when I went to that concert, I went to this barbershop concert, or Sweet Adelines, I should say more, because it was a all-female group. I was really listening analytically and really trying to listen to all the music I heard and take in how much of this am I hearing, because I know the sound of a dominant seventh, I know the sound of secondary dominants, I know the sound of minor 4 chords, I know these things by sound, and I can tell when I'm hearing things and particular things. And so I was listening for a couple of things, and so a comment that I heard about this chord with the added ninth is, yeah, it's a pretty chord and it takes it outside it's, not that barbershop's not pretty, but it takes it outside of the usual barbershop thing. And the same for chords with sixths, that both of those are more swing things, right? Swing era vocal groups have that sound, these sixth chords. That sound. So it's not that those sounds don't get used in barbershop, but the thing that I heard, and it bears out here, is if the melody is the ninth or the sixth, well, then that gives you the permission. And that's what's happening here, right? The melody is the ninth. At least that's what you're telling me here. So if that really is the lead on the B flat there, because I don't know the song otherwise. I'm all alone, nobody wants me. Is that how it goes? I'm all alone. It does seem a little odd that the song itself would have that ninth there as that main melody note. It's the down. I mean, that is the first downbeat of the whole song, right? This is kind of an introduction, those first 4 bars. So that's really the first prominent long note. It's beat 1 of bar 1 of the main form, and it's a half note, and it's a ninth. So that's that's a thing. I mean, that's a little unusual of a sound, and so yeah, if it's going to get harmonized with that one chord like that, it's going to be a ninth, and so great. So it's yeah, I think whoever wrote the actual melody there, words, music. So if it's Frank Anderson who wrote that melody and actually intended it to be an A flat chord, great. Now here's what's possible. I don't know the song, but if the original conception of Jack and Frank there, like I don't know if they wrote it as they wrote it as sheet music and maybe gave it to some singer to record. I don't know the story of this, but I might wonder if that wasn't really an A flat chord originally. If it was really more like I'm all alone, nobody wants me. I'm not alone. Don't need sympathy, and not actually reaching the one chord until this bar. That might have been the original harmonization. The original harmonization might have all been a B flat minor 7 chord there, the 2 chord. I don't know that. I'm just guessing that it's possible. Because, yeah, that ninth is, it's not like unheard of for 1922, but it's definitely a daring choice. So, anyhow, that's my observation there. And yeah, the same is going to be true about sixth chords. And there's a couple of those in here, and there's this whole idea of the barbershop sixth chord in my analysis of where's my the old songs. By the way, Rod, do you all sing this, the old songs? Is this only American Barbershop Harmony Society where this is the theme song done at every meeting, or is this like you do this all the time also? I'm just curious about that. So let me get the chat back over here. But this chord right here. I gotta remember the octave thing. This is basically an E flat sixth chord, right? E flat major triad with an added sixth. And that chord is, okay, that is a sixth chord, or you can look at it and say it's a C minor chord in first inversion. Either way is technically correct. And that is the, yeah, so glad to know that this is as familiar to you as it would be to anyone in the States. Anyone who's barbershop, because I didn't know this song before. But this particular chord here, the 4 chord with an added sixth, masquerading as basically a 2 chord, or vice versa, 2 chord masquerading as a 4 chord with a sixth. You call it what you want. That is the sixth chord that is the most common in barbershop. this idea of taking a 4 chord and letting the melody note, maybe, because in this case, the melody note does have the C on the second beat. It's got both the 5th and the 6th. And is this really the right baritone part? Have you ever sung baritone on this, or did I make a mistake in there? Is it really 4 C's in a row? Yeah, could be. Yeah, I guess the only reason not to go to a B flat here, because otherwise I'd say, hey, this should have gone to a B flat, so we'd have a B flat and C in both chords, but then we'd have parallel 5ths coming down on the bottom part there. So anyhow, that idea of that 9th chord and that 6th chord, they exist in very specific contexts in barbershop music, in barbershop harmony. And so they're ones that you don't necessarily use every day, but boy, there's some lovely, rich uses of dominant chords. It's like in here, I need to play that measure again. Right, that melody there, not melody, but top voice. This chord here, I'm looking at alone. F flat going to E flat, C going up to D flat, F sharp going to G, A going to B flat. I mean, this is really interesting motion that if you had to analyze it in traditional classical ways, you might struggle a little bit. But if you understand it in context of barbershop resolutions of 7th chords and treatments of how the tritones are resolving, it all fits within this genre. So it's almost like this whole new set of rules or ways of resolving things that are used. A lot of this parallel motion. That's what's happening here. That tritone between the F sharp and the C is resolving in parallel motion upwards. And basically everyone's going parallel motion upwards, except the top voice is coming down. Other places you'll see all the voices moving together. And so it's really a fascinating, different way of treating some of these dominant 7th chords. That's, yeah, it's just really interesting. Okay, so anyhow, I've talked about a bunch of different things today, and I hope that you've all enjoyed hopefully all of it. You know, I'd love to think that you got something out of everything that we talked about today. And yeah, we'll be back and more of the same, more stuff next time. Hopefully, keep submitting some music for me to listen to, and I look forward to doing this again next week. Next week, also MuseScore Cafe. Hopefully, we'll have some new MuseScore 4 playback stuff to check out. And yeah, keep writing music, keep posting it, and I'll keep giving comments and keep tossing out fodder for you to be thinking about during the Musicianship Skills Workshop. So, definitely, I'd love to see some more of the barbershop music with some analysis posted so we can talk more about that. But as always, whatever you're interested in, I'm interested in also. So look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.